In this video, I would like to explain of what is included and what isn't in our fabrications. So let's start with probably the easiest example, a base plate. Now a base plate includes the bottom plate, it includes the holes in the plate, normally it's 4 of them, and the welding of this plate to a beam. This connection in our quoting system does not include the anchor bolts because we don't know what is going to be attached to, and also not the beam itself because the size of the beam needs to be input separately. An end plate is very similar to the base plate. It includes the plate, the holes in the plate, again probably 4, and the welding of this plate to the beam, but excludes the bolts and the beam itself. The end plate connection includes the plate that sits on top of the column or one of the beams. It includes the holes both in the plate and in the beam. So if you have 4 holes in the plate, then you'll have another 4 holes drilled probably to the flange of the other beam. It includes the welding of the plate to one of the beams and the bolts required to bolt the connection together. And similar to the previous connections, it excludes the beams itself because they have to be put in separately. A moment connection is basically an end plate connection but with an additional back plate. So this connection includes both plates, the holes, all the holes required, the welding for both beams and obviously both plates, and then all the bolts required to bolt this connection together. This connection also excludes the beams because they have to be put in separately depending on their size. A cleat is a connection that does not require any welding, so it includes 2 angles, 1 on each side, all the holes, normally there's 6 holes to be drilled, 4 in the beam that takes the cross member and then 2 in the cross member. 2 notches, the top and the bottom of the cross member needs to be notched. If this beam is smaller than the main beam that is taking this beam, then only the top or the bottom flange needs to be notched. And this connection also includes all the bolts, but it excludes all the beams. A spacer is a tube used to space out the distance between 2 beams that go parallel to each other. So this connection includes the spacer itself, it includes the stud to connect the 2 beams together with the 2 nuts and washers, and also the holes in each beam, so one side and the other, so 2 holes. But remember that one spacer in our CRM system means only one of those in a beam. So if you have, let's say, 8 of them in a beam, you have to put the number 8. And similar to all our previous connections, this connection also excludes the beams. A spacer PFC is exactly the same as the spacer beam previously described. The only difference is that here we have PFC sections rather than UBs or UCs. A cranked 90-degree beam is a fabrication that allows the beam to crank twice so that the top beam is perpendicular to the vertical beam. So this connection in our CRM system allows for 4 miter cuts because each beam needs to be cut to make the angles, and then the full welds for both the joints. And it obviously excludes the beams itself. A kink 90 degree still means that the angle between the 2 members is 90 degrees, but there's only one connection. So this connection includes 2 miter cuts, obviously at 45 degrees, and then the welding, the full weld to connect the 2 beams. And this connection, unsurprisingly, does not include the beams. A kink angle is a connection that allows 2 beams to be welded together at a certain angle, so it is not 90 degrees between the 2 members, it could be any value. So this connection includes 2 miter cuts and the full weld in between. A gusset is a plate and it is sort of a triangular shape like shown on this image, and one gusset in terms of our fabrication is basically one gusset. So if you have, let's say, 5 of them in a beam, you'd have to put 5 of those. And this includes the plate itself and then the welding on both sides of a gusset. The gusset connection excludes the beam and the plate which the gusset is holding. A plate bottom connection is a connection that allows us to price up the cost of welding a plate to a beam, and this time this plate is attached to the bottom of it. It includes welding, and there are 2 surfaces that need to be welded, and it is normally a hit and miss, 100mm hit, 100mm miss. Sometimes there's more miss, so it could be 100mm of weld and then 300mm of gap. And it also excludes the beam and the plate itself. A top plate is what it says, but here, similarly to the bottom plate, we have 2 surfaces that need to be welded, and again the material itself, so the plate and the beam, need to be put in separately. A stiffener is a plate that is welded to the inside of the beam, so it connects to top and bottom flanges and is adjacent to the web. So this connection comprises of the plate itself and the welding of it, and obviously it does not include the beam, but then also one stiffener means there's only one, so if you have them both sides, you'd have to put in the quantity of 2, and if there are more, then obviously the right amount. A tab is a small plate with a hole. Sometimes it might be a slotted hole, and it is welded to the flanges of a column so that you can then bolt it to a brick wall. And similar to all the other connections, it does not include the beam itself. A hole flange is basically a way of describing the fact that a flange of a beam needs a hole, and one hole flange means one hole. So if you have 10 holes to be drilled, then you basically need to put in the quantity of 10. And also they are normally spaced out around between 400mm and 600, and quite often they are on one edge and then the next one will be on the other edge of the flange, and so on. And again, it does not include the beam. A web hole is a hole that will be drilled in the web, and again, one quantity means one hole. A splice A is the most typical splice, and the simpler version is a splice A1, which has 4 plates because it has 2 flange plates, one at the top, the other one at the bottom. It has 2 web plates, one side of the web and then the other side. It includes all the holes required for this connection and then all the bolts to connect the beams together. But bear in mind that this does not include the HSFG bolts, which are much more expensive and need to be put in separately in another field. The splice A1 connection does not include the beams, which need to be put in separately. A A2 splice is basically the same as A1, although this one has additional 4 plates, so it has the narrower plates on the inside of each flange of the connection. And splice B is a simpler splice, although it is not as strong as the A version. It is basically 2 end plates bolted together, so this connection includes all the holes in the plates, the bolts, again excluding HSFG bolts, plates, 2 of them, and the welding of the plates to the beams, and again it does not include the beams itself. A Gallo bracket is used to support a chimney breast, although they have been restricted by many councils, but if you do come across it, the Fabrication Gallo bracket allows for a full bracket. And again, it's down to 1 of them, so if you need 2 of them, you just have to put a quantity of 2. And it includes the 3 angle sections, the welding of the 3 items together, and the holes in the vertical member to fix it to the vertical wall. And basically it does not exclude anything because everything is included. Next we have a hole flitch. It is the same as let's say a whole web, but this is used as a hole in a flitch plate. So it includes obviously drilling the hole, but does not include the material itself. And again, this is a one hole. So if you have 12 holes, you'd have to put in 12 of these fabrications. The box frame connection is an easy way of pricing up a box frame, but bear in mind that this only includes 4 simple end plate connections. So if you have more complicated connections, let's say the moment connection with stiffeners, it will unfortunately not include them. And on top of that, this connection does not include the beams, any gussets, tabs required for the columns, or additional holes for the webs or flanges of these beams. Thank you very much. If you'd like to connect and watch future videos, then please sign up to one of our platforms. Thank you.